Welcome into the Tailgate powered by Campus to Canton. I'm your host today, Colin Decker at C2C Decker on Twitter, joined as always by Chris Moxley at Chris Moxley 19, Nicholas E. and Alan at CFB Winning Edge. And we have Alfred with us today here at Alfred JF. Got a big day of college football ahead, especially for some of us. But before we get into that, we have a couple of games from this week that we have already happened that we want to recap here. First up, Tony Elliott and Virginia, 3-7 last year, 2-8 this year. But the last 5 games, a win versus William and Mary, a win versus number 10 UNC at the time, an overtime loss to Miami, a loss to Georgia Tech, and that loss to Louisville this week, where they did have a lead in the fourth quarter. Tony Elliott coming over from Clemson to be the head coach here this year. Is Tony Elliott on the hot seat because of the record or not because of how hard they've been playing the past couple of games?
If you had asked me this about 6 weeks ago, I would have said yes. I actually think that they have something in Calandria. Like, he's still a little wild, but I think he's probably the guy. They have been playing hard, like legit hard. And I actually think the offensive play calling is a little bit more creative this year than it was last year. So I actually think he deserves another year. I've been pretty impressed with Virginia this year. 2-8. As much as you can be impressed with a 2-8 team, I have been.
All right, Nick.
They've shown, momentum and advancing as the year goes on. Like, that's all you can really ask for a first-year head coach taking over a dumpster fire.
Kind of reminiscent of Arizona a few years ago, where Arizona was not a very good team, but they started to put it together at the end of the year. Look where they're at this year. Nick, what are your numbers?
Component in there with Arizona that they've kind of crushed it. I don't know if Virginia's going to get that.
That's a fair point.
I agree. I think that we've seen a lot of positive signs that, the record doesn't necessarily indicate how well this team had played at times. I mean, they had just a heartbreaking loss in week 2 to James Madison. Looked like they were in control. The collegefootballdata.com post-game win expectancy numbers on that game were 89%. The loss to NC State, they were 76% to win that game. If you look at the underlying numbers, 73% against Miami. And in some cases, you could understand that, okay, well, if a team is losing games that they are statistically supposed to win, perhaps that's a sign of bad coaching. But sometimes it's a sign of bad luck, and sometimes it's a sign of you have to lose close sometimes before you win close, and then once you start winning close, then the next step is winning big. And Virginia is a tough program, and the situation last year where they really weren't a good team but ended on such a tragic note. Quite honestly, I think this season in Elliott's second year, seeing some of the progress, some of that including what we've seen from Calandria, some of the very close losses, some, basically an All-American type performance from Malik Washington this year. I do think that there's enough positivity and progress of what I've seen on the field that it would be too early to get rid of Elliott this year. I think at least one more season to see if they can turn some of those close losses into close wins. This program, I think, has made some positive steps in the right direction this year.
They've been in 8 one-score games out of their 10 games. Like, that's pretty impressive for Virginia, in my opinion, considering that, I had really low expectations of them coming into the year, and they've outperformed them. Like, we were looking like they were a 20-point dog against a really solid Louisville team, and they kept it close. I mean, it's been an impressive showing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you highlighted Malik Washington, Nick, and how good he has been this year. He's somebody we just got in the chat. He's somebody we're starting pretty much every week moving forward with the way that offense has looked and funneled towards him, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, next week against Duke is a little bit of a tougher matchup, and Duke right now I anticipate it's kind of one of those teams that'll want to slow it down, keep it close since they're limited on the offensive side of the ball. But yeah, I think Washington is so good that you have to.
Well, and even Malachi Fields, like I'm telling on myself the state of this roster, but like I've been rolling out Malachi Fields. He's been okay, 4 for 80 kind of guy in a lot of games. So Washington's definitely the wide receiver 1, but like it's been a productive offense.
It has. And Chris, you highlighted Calandria, true freshman, who has looked very good here. What is the ceiling for this Virginia team with a Calandria-led quarterback at quarterback, as we're going to keep seeing him progress, hopefully, over the years?
I mean, bowling, maybe some 8-9 win seasons. It's a hard place to recruit to a little bit. I mean, you got North Carolina, who is going up in that region. You have Clemson also bringing in kids from there. South Carolina's been targeting the Maryland, Virginia area a bunch too, with Shane Beamer's connection. So you're like third or fourth on kids in Virginia, and that's like a tough place to be because it's not a talent-rich place. So I don't think you can ever expect double-digit win seasons, but I think you have to feel really good about an 8 or 9 win season if you're them. Like that's definitely progress.
Great.
Yeah. I don't know why they ever fired. To be totally honest, I don't know why they fired the whole staff prior to Elliott. For what it's worth, I thought they were doing the most with what they had.
Well, they didn't, right? Mendenhall left, retired.
Oh, that's true. He quit basically. Yeah. And they that whole situation was weird with Robert and I too, because that offense was clicking with Brennan Armstrong that year. They looked really good, and then they brought in the opposite with Tony Elliott, like the most conservative play caller you can get, who was not impressive at Clemson either, by the way. Surprised he actually got a head coaching job and not demoted to like a different OC job elsewhere.
Yeah, I know that was something we were all pretty surprised about with the hiring there. And none of us were really a huge fan of it because, like you said, with the track record at Clemson, it was not particularly inspiring. The ACC is going to be undergoing some changes here. SMU, currently the class of the AAC, they're 6-0 in conference, most points in the 4 in the conference, and the least points against. Nobody else is particularly close in either category. There are only 2 losses this year, Oklahoma and TCU. How's SMU going to fare as they head into the ACC?
So I've been thinking a little bit about this scenario because the way I do our CFB winning edge team profiles and power ratings and things like that, a lot of the teams that have been very successful at the in the AAC really do build some of those roster strength numbers through production. And there's a case to be made that some of those teams entered this year a bit overrated. I mean, I've been too high on UCF all year. I've been too high on Cincinnati all year. BYU hit and miss, but I worry a little bit that because SMU has been so good, and the way that they have been able to go after Power 5, 4-star, high 3-star recruits who are coming back to the Dallas and Metroplex area after as transfers. Their talent numbers are really, really high already compared to most teams in the American or in the Group of 5. And I worry that taking that next step, some of the way, particularly how I calculate things, they just might look a little more talented than they actually are on paper, the way I calculate it. So I'm cautious, and it's not to say that SMU couldn't immediately just jump up and be competitive. They have all the resources in the world, and they do have a lot of talent. They've been playing really, really well. But I'm wondering if there's something that me in particular and the way that I approach things might be able to learn from what we saw from the Big 12 teams who made the jump this most recent season. And I think there's, not to derail your question or go too far on a tangent. I'm thinking about some similar things with the Pac-12 teams. They're making the move to the Big 10 as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. We haven't seen a lot of success from those teams that have made the jump from G5 to P5 this past year. But SMU, like you said, does have a higher talent advantage than a lot of the AAC. And they have done pretty well in the portal as well. They've brought in several running backs in the portal. They brought in several wide receivers. And I think people on the defensive line there as well. So I think we could see a nice transition for them. The ACC is maybe a little less daunting at the bottom than the Big 12. Yeah.
Way less daunting. And way less daunting than the Big 10, obviously. I mean, the ACC is rough. I mean, FSU, who I still don't think is that good, is the class of the ACC by far.
I think
Rude awakening in the playoff. That's my prediction.
SMU's defense is really impressive this year, which you couldn't always say in the past. I think that they have such an edge being in the Dallas area, right? Like, even if you're fourth or fifth on one of these recruits, you're still getting a really high end guy for the most part. And SMU has a lot of money and resources, like Nick said. So I think they'll be able to be competitive. They're not going to be like a top 3 team every year, but they'll be a middle of the pack team, I think, which is good.
Yeah, and they bring in an experienced quarterback with them when they make that transition in Preston Stone, who has looked very good this year, especially for fantasy purposes. Alfred, you had a special shout out you wanted to give here?
I was talking to Austin earlier this week, and we were looking at games coming up, and at the time I was like, UNLV is 7-2, and then they went out last night and covered. Made me a little bit of cash because I always fade Wyoming outside of Laramie, and they covered last night. UNLV 8-2 with like a lot of freshmen playing. Their quarterback, I believe, is a true freshman. I think one of their better running backs, top 2 guy in the rotation, is a freshman. That's just crazy. UNLV, like a legitimately good G5 team this year after, being New Mexico level bad for so long. So just, shout out. I think they just deserve some flowers here. 8-2 UNLV.
Who would have thought?
Is Barry Odom gone after this year?
Sorry,
I think he is. Barry Odom gone.
Their head coach. I think that I don't know, but maybe Brennan Marion's. He's been kind of on 1 year here, 1 year there for a while.
He's at Pitt.
Maybe he gets
now UNLV.
Maybe he now gets a head coaching opportunity. But one of the points I wanted to make, and I definitely agree with Alfred, that what UNLV has done this year is incredibly, incredibly impressive. I think even more so because I feel like a lot of us had some really high hopes for Doug Brumfield, their quarterback, coming into the year. And he's been hurt. And Jaden Maeva has taken over that role. And I think maybe Brumfield actually might be healthy enough to play now. But Maeva's been doing such a good job that they just decided to keep rolling with him as the starter. So to do what they've done and consistently get better, it seems like as the year has gone on, after losing what I thought was a pretty good quarterback who really had a pretty high ceiling early in the year, has been really impressive.
Yeah, I think Brumfield's healthy enough too, for what it's worth. I think this true freshman they got he's got the goods for sure. Yeah, Brandon Marion's such an interesting story, right? Like, he was at William & Mary with Cam Newton's younger brother, and they were running this go-go offense, which is pretty unique to college football in general. And it's working. It's working against good teams too. So it's exciting to see innovation. And I think Marion's finally getting a shot because he was the offensive coordinator at Pitt. He was offensive coordinator at Pitt, right? And then he was a wide receiver coach at Texas.
Wide receivers coach at Pitt. He was co-offensive coordinator with GJ Kinney at Hawaii in 2020.
There we go. Okay.
But it seems like Kinney was the play caller. So this is the first time, I believe, since William & Mary that he's been the play caller. And he's succeeded everywhere he's gone. I'm still impressed. He averaged 31 yards per catch when he was a player at Tulsa 1 year. So he's carried that over into a really, really fun coaching career as well.
Yeah, good times. So shout out UNLV.
And shout out to their true freshman quarterback, like you guys said, Maeva. He is an early candidate for freshman of the week this week with 3 touchdowns total. As we get into quarterbacks here, we got 2 questions in the chat that we're going to get to. So if everybody watching along, drop some likes, drop your questions in the chat. We're here to help you with your playoff matchups this week. I know most leagues playoffs start today. First question we had quarterback related. We have to sit one 6-point passing touchdown. We got Jalen Rayner, the quarterback at Arkansas State, Davis Brin, quarterback at Georgia State, John Reese Plumlee, quarterback at UCF, Donovan Smith, quarterback at Houston. Who are we sitting out of that group?
Who does Arkansas State have again?
South Alabama.
I might sit Rainer.
I
don't know. South Alabama hasn't really been nails on defense this year.
Yeah, they've been good.
This is a similar question that I've got. I think I've got a pretty similar decision that I've got to make. I might be tempted to sit Plumlee out of the screen, but I could go with Rayner as well.
I haven't kept up. What's Oklahoma State's defense like this year? Because UCF's at home, but Oklahoma State coming in. I just feel like UCF's been kind of overwhelmed by some of the Big 12 talent. And some of these teams have kind of just. I thought they'd be a little more competitive, and they're just kind of getting, I think, a wake up call. Like Big 12 schedule is no joke.
Well,
I think they win today, for what it's worth, and the total
I actually
4.5.
Yeah, I have UCF favored in this game.
Oh my!
But again, like I said earlier, I've been too high on UCF this year. But they have a little bit of the same thing going on that I mentioned with Virginia, where they've got some post-game win expectancy numbers that don't necessarily line up with their win-loss record. But to your question about the Oklahoma State defense, in the CFB winning edge team performance numbers, they're 64th in overall defense, 84th against the pass, 65th against the run. Some key numbers that really they look pretty vulnerable: 107th in yards per play allowed against FBS opponents, and 109th in yards per pass attempt against. They're 100th in EPA per play, or the college football data's projected points allowed per play. So they're definitely not the stingiest defense, but they have been playing so well recently that it gives me some pause.
A lot of that is Ollie Gordon and being able to extend drives with the rushing game and give their defense a little bit of a break, which they weren't able to do at the beginning of the year. So yeah, I don't know. I like John Reese Plumlee out of that group. I would sit Rayner. Right, he just hasn't been as good last couple of weeks either.
A lot of good options there in that one. We have one more quarterback start sits question before we get into the quarterback rankings here. We have a 6-point passing touchdown league again. Start 2 of Jalen Milroe, quarterback Alabama, Thomas Castellanos, quarterback for Boston College, Caleb Williams, quarterback USC, and Austin Reed, quarterback Western Kentucky.
Is it crazy for me to say that I would sit Austin Reed? Because that's who I think I would sit out of this group. That offense is not very good this year, and New Mexico State's defense has been playing a lot better last couple of weeks. I think I would sit Austin Reed.
I might. Well, and he's the only guy out of that group that doesn't give you some rushing juice, and I always am going to lean towards a guy who can throw down 40, 50 yards on the ground, maybe get a rushing touchdown. So, yeah, I think I agree with Mox.
I might be tempted to sit Castellanos. In projections that I've got, he is in the 40s this week, and he's not 100%, right? I know he's been playing, but he's still,
I don't think
seems a little banged up. But I definitely agree that Reed and I don't love the matchup against New Mexico State. New Mexico State's one of those teams that they scheme up so well, they prepare so well, it seems like, to say, okay, how are we going to, what gives us the best way of beating this particular team? My guess is that, this week against Western Kentucky, that the answer to that is to play slow, keep away, limit possessions, that type of thing, try to make it a low scoring game. with a chance to win in the fourth quarter, and that just doesn't add up to a lot of good opportunity for Reed, and that offense, as you guys said, is really taking a step back this week.
Very disappointing, because I'm sure a lot of owners out there don't have a better option than Reed, like somebody mentions in the chat. But none of those quarterbacks we mentioned are actually in our top 14 this week for the quarterback rankings. This week, top of the list, we have a familiar name, Jaden Daniels, quarterback for LSU, going up against Florida this week.
He is going to play today, for what it's worth. There were some questions. He is playing.
There we go. He is playing today, clearing the concussion protocol. We have Bo Nix, quarterback at Oregon, going up against that sieve of a USC defense, but they did just fire Alex Grinch. Jordan McLeod, quarterback JMU, up against UConn. Drake May, quarterback UNC, going up against Duke in this one. Caden Salter, quarterback for Liberty, going up against Old Dominion. Will Howard at Kansas State, playing Baylor this week. Seth Hennigan, Memphis quarterback, against Charlotte.
Who's banged up?
Seth Hennigan is banged up.
We don't know if he's going to play yet.
All
right. Keep an eye out for that one. We will have more on that later in the show, I'm sure, during the injury section. We have Nicholas Vitatio, quarterback, Middle Tennessee State, playing FIU. Maddox Madison, quarterback for Boise State, against New Mexico. JJ McCarthy, quarterback for Michigan, playing Penn State this week in that big matchup. Spencer Rattler, South Carolina, against Vanderbilt. Jordan Travis, Florida State, against Miami. Jacob Zeno, UAB versus Navy. And finally, Byron Brown, USF versus Temple. Nick, I'm going to come over here to you on this one. What stands out compared to your rankings? There's some guys that I think, maybe aren't on here that some other people are familiar with seeing in the top of the rankings.
Yeah, and I've said this before, so if folks have been listening week in and week out, my apologies. But the way I do projections, the way they're a little bit different than what are on the site. Mine take a larger window into account, past years, play calling history, things like that. So a guy like Frank Harris grades out pretty well for me. This week's actually top 5. In my projections, going up against Rice today. Similar in some ways to Western Kentucky, this UTSA offense hasn't been the same. I mean, they've missed Zachary Franklin, they've missed JT Clark this year for sure. But after Harris had some real injury issues in the first month of the season, he's looked a lot closer to the Frank Harris that we saw in previous years since. So I don't hate that projection this week. And another name, as I was kind of scrolling down my list that looks pretty good for me this week, is Kyle McCord going up against Michigan State. So I think that he's trending in the right direction. Of course, has the best wide receiver in the country at his disposal, Marvin Harrison Jr. And then Emeka Egbuka was back and able to play last week, and hopefully is getting closer and closer to 100%. So I think that he's a pretty good matchup this week as well.
All right, Alfred, what are we seeing on these rankings here that stands out to you?
I think it looks pretty good. There's a, I feel like maybe Dylan Gabriel should be on there going up against a pretty not good West Virginia, and it's at Oklahoma. West Virginia usually plays worse on the road, and he's been bad last week, 14 points, but he's regularly put up 30-something points in a lot of the games this year. I feel like he's been pretty good, and I would maybe slot him in the double digits here. I don't know. Am I crazy to say I'd rather start him than JJ McCarthy at Penn State? JJ McCarthy seems a little high here. I do not think that's going to be an offensive smorgasbord. So that was one guy that, especially given the matchup, I think Gabriel, even coming off a bad game last week, I think he's been pretty darn good. 25 points seems reasonable plus for him. I think Jordan Travis maybe a little higher. But yeah, the first 10, I think, or the first 9, I think, are pretty strong. After that, the double digits, there's a few things I don't know if that makes sense to me.
All right. And Chris, what do you got here? What's standing out to you this week in our quarterback rankings?
Just keep an eye on Seth Hennigan's injury. He went out at the end of the last game. I believe he came back in, but I'm not totally sure he's going to play today. I think it might be Tevin Carter, the backup quarterback, who looked good, and I liked him coming in too. I think he's a good player, but just that's a situation to monitor. And if I had to guess now, I think Hennigan sits, but
Charlotte is a softer matchup, but Memphis does still have some AAC hopes alive here. I believe they're third in the conference right now, so they might need this one. We'll see. Drop your start sit questions in the chat here. Drop a like on the video as well. We got to get more likes on that video. There's a ton of people out here chatting it up in the comments. I know you guys are watching. Show some likes out there. But we will move into the running back position this week. Another familiar name at the top there. We got Ollie Gordon, Oklahoma State, who is carrying some fantasy teams right now and trying to carry you guys to championships. We got Bucky Irving, running back at Oregon, going up against that USC defense that we talked about a little bit before. Blake Watson, running back for Memphis, playing Charlotte, could be in for a bigger workload if Hennigan doesn't go, like we've been talking about.
He's also hurt.
Memphis is very banged up right now. Is Blake Watson playing this week?
If I were to guess, Watson is more likely than Hennigan, the way I've sort of read things this week.
Okay. All right. We got Quentin Cooley, running back for Liberty, playing Old Dominion. Travion Henderson, Ohio State running back, playing Michigan State. Marshawn Lloyd on the other side of that USC-Oregon matchup this week. Then we get Malik Sherrod at number 7. Fresno State playing San Jose State. LaDamian Webb, running back at South Alabama, playing Arkansas State this week. Devin Neal, running back Kansas, going up against Texas Tech. RJ Harvey on the other side of the Oklahoma State UCF matchup this week. Trey Benson, running back Florida State, playing Miami. Taj Brooks, running back Texas Tech, playing Kansas. Omarion Hampton, running back for North Carolina, playing Duke this week. And Jaden Ott, the running back at California, going up against Washington State this week. Nick, I'll come over to you here again. What stands out compared to this list, compared to what you have in your rankings?
Well, the highest in my projections, who's not in the top 14 on this list, Mekhi Hughes, going up against Tulsa, the Tulane running back, has really flashed at points this season, and I think that is a particularly good matchup, and one that is a little bit lower. That I know a guy that I was way too low on coming into the year, but it's just been consistently really, really good. Kyrie Robinson, San Jose State. They're going up against Fresno State late tonight. And I know my projection on that game when it came out, it definitely caused me to raise an eyebrow, but things have been moving toward. Last I saw, San Jose State is actually a slight favorite in that game. So Fresno State's been very, very good, but Kyrie Robinson has been excellent as well, and think you'll have an opportunity for a good night tonight.
All right, Alfred, what do you got this week that stands out in the running back rankings for you here?
My main shout out is just Austin Nace. He was all over Ollie Gordon, like when he was, as a recruit, and because of that, I scooped him up in tons of leagues and have been riding. I'm one of those guys who's carrying fantasy leagues into the playoffs. He's been sensational. Crazy to see him as the number 1 running back, on our list after kind of a nondescript start to his career, but holy cow, he has just been insane. Other than that, I think it looks pretty good. It's interesting not to see Judkins on there. I get it playing Georgia, but he's still a good player, and it's tough to just college, I suppose. There's so many other soft matchups that you're gonna want to play other guys, but weird not to see Judkins. I don't disagree, but it's just weird.
Sure that he's causing some people some headaches right now with that start sit decision. If you have any start sit headaches, drop them in the chat here. More than happy to help you out with these as we go along. But Chris, what's standing out to you in the running back rankings this week?
I'm not sure I would start Marshawn Lloyd. If I could look elsewhere, I think the Oregon's defensive front's pretty darn good. And I don't know what to expect from this USC team this week. They're 16-point underdogs, so not like this could be conducive to running the ball a whole lot either. So I'd be cautious starting any of the USC running backs.
And Lloyd specifically didn't play last week, so
banged up.
Yeah, I think he's going to go today, but still.
Yeah.
The USC team, maybe they're on quit watch as well, potentially after a rough stretch here.
Yeah.
Maybe.
We'll see. We'll see how that shakes out down the stretch. We had a start-sit question in the chat related to these wide receivers and 2 running backs mixed in there as well. Start 1, it's a point PPR league. Derwin Burgess, wide receiver at Georgia Southern. Darius Taylor, running back at Minnesota, who has been banged up a little bit this year. Evan Stewart, wide receiver at Texas A&M, and Rocket Sanders, the running back at Arkansas. I think this is a tough one.
I think you got to start Burgess, right? I mean, he's in that 4. He would be, unless I'm missing something, he would be one of the safest for me.
Well, he's the one that's healthy, right? I mean, Taylor hasn't played the last couple of weeks. Stewart didn't play last week. Sanders we saw and looked like perhaps he is close to, getting back to full speed or close to it. Burgess has been a little disappointing or come up a little short.
But Hood is
expected.
Hood's kind of risen up there, right?
Yes, yeah. Hood's been the better of the two so far this year, but yeah, I think Burgess is probably the safest option, and then Sanders maybe a close second for me.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're going safe in the playoffs here this week. Nobody wants to swing for that Minnesota running back upside.
I don't know how healthy he is. I mean,
Purdue is a hell of a great matchup, though. They are bad. Dang.
All right. Well, we got one other start-sit question here in the chat right now. Full point PPR. We're looking at Quinshawn Judkins, Alfred, the guy you brought up earlier, running back for Ole Miss. Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver at Florida. Mecca Egbuka, wide receiver, Ohio State. And Robert Lewis, wide receiver, Georgia State. Picking 2. Who do we like out of this crew?
Who's Georgia State got? App State.
Marshall
this week.
Wait, Georgia State? I've got Georgia State at.
I thought you said Georgia Southern. I'm sorry.
Because Robert Lewis is Georgia
State. Georgia State is App State. Appalachian State.
And that's Lewis.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Mm-hmm. He's been pretty good. Pearsall, I think, is a pretty good start. I mean, Florida's got a ton of problems, but LSU's defense is bad. They're probably going to have to throw, and I think the emergence of Eugene Wilson has been great, but I think, Pearsall's still going to have plenty of opportunities. He returns punts. You could get a kickoff return or a punt return. I think Pearsall's a pretty good start. I think it's one of the other 3 that's the question.
Yeah, I would start Pearsall and Lewis. I'm not really sure what's going on with Egbuka, to be honest. I know he's been hurt. He came back. I think he's healthy. It's a good matchup, but it's, Kyle McCord, who I'm not as high on this week. And I don't really want to start Judkins today. To be honest, his rushing prop is like 79, and that's not exactly what you want.
Yeah.
It's a tough matchup this week for Judkins. I agree. I do like Robert Lewis and Pearsall this week as well. Moving into the wide receiver rankings here, none of those guys showed up either, spoiler alert, but we got another familiar name at the top. Malik Neighbors, wide receiver for LSU, has been on a tear, gets Florida this week. We got Tez Johnson, wide receiver at Oregon, playing USC in that sieve of a defense. Wow. Marvin Harrison Jr., Ohio State wide receiver against Michigan State. Another Oregon wide receiver in Troy Franklin. Xavier Legette, wide receiver for South Carolina, playing Vanderbilt. Brendan Presley, wide receiver at Oklahoma State, getting UCF this week. We've been seeing a lot of Oklahoma State UCF guys in these top of the rankings. Drake Stoops, wide receiver at Oklahoma, playing West Virginia. Joey Hobart, wide receiver at Texas Tech, going up against Coastal Carolina. We got Jalen Royals at 9, Utah State wide receiver playing Nevada this week. Joshua Cephas, wide receiver at UTSA, playing Rice. Aaron Bedgood, a new name to the list here, wide receiver at Liberty, playing Old Dominion. Sean Atkins, wide receiver at USF, playing Temple. Phillip Brooks, wide receiver, Kansas State, Baylor. And we rounded out with one more Oklahoma State wide receiver in Rashad Owens, playing UCF. Nick, what stands out to you in this ranking set here? There's some names on this list that people might be wondering where they are.
Yeah, when I was taking a look at the start sits, I thought I was really onto something looking at Brennan Presley at Oklahoma State. But there are obviously, our rankings are all over that. So the first that jumps out to me, and somebody brought up a good point in the chat earlier, that maybe we should have mentioned Michael Penix, even though they're going against Utah today. Tough matchup. That offense has been so good, and Utah is, I think, pretty vulnerable, even on the defensive side of the ball this week. I've got Rome Odunze ranked pretty high in my projections this week. Jalen Polk as well. So, that might be a direction that I would go. I don't think there's any reason necessarily to get too cute and remove those guys from my lineups in favor of some of these perhaps a little bit surprising names that have popped up in our top 14. But otherwise, LaJohntay Wester is a name, FAU wide receiver. They're going up against East Carolina, who looked really good against Tulane last week. But I think that, what we've seen for him on the very high end, he's definitely worth a shot. I certainly wouldn't be moving him out of my lineup this week.
In the playoffs, you got to start your studs. I definitely agree. You can't pull Wester out of the lineup. Even with the Washington receivers having that tough matchup at Utah, I think you got to start them as well. Utah is much better on the ground. They're 6th in the country in rush yards allowed per game, 33rd in pass yards allowed per game. So if you're going to beat them, it is through the air. Alfred, what do you got on this list here that stands out to you this week?
Yeah, I mean, kind of going to echo what Nick said. And I think in general, I'm more worried about tough running back matchups and kind of game flow with running backs than I am with receivers. So even though it's a tough matchup, I still think I'm pretty comfortable. And if you have Odunze, you're not benching him. So is he a top 14 guy? I'm not sure. I think there's a decent chance. I mean, in PPR, those receptions add up. They are going to still throw. It's what they're made of, and they're not going to be able to run Dylan Johnson like they did last week. Which I know disappointed like everybody in the world. So I think Odunze should be in here. Like guys like Phillip Brooks. I mean, I don't know if I'm missing something, but like, what is his ceiling? Like 5 to 6 catches for 80 to 90 yards. I mean, I don't understand why he's there, even in a good matchup. Like Kansas State just isn't going to throw the ball all around. So that kind of doesn't make tons of sense to me. And then the other one is Troy Franklin. I know Tez Johnson went nuts last week. Didn't he have like 13 catches or something insane? But the body of work says Troy Franklin's their one. Is there something, and I'll throw it to the group, is there something about the specific matchup where Tez, is more likely to get a lot of action this week? I still think I'd say Troy Franklin, over him. And they both should be on the list probably, but
the biggest thing, as I understand it, is recent history carries a pretty heavy weight in these projections in particular. And Johnson's coming off a 12 catch, 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that probably gave him a real boost this week. But yeah, I agree that there's a much higher likelihood that Franklin's going to be the guy this week. He's just, he's been good, but he hasn't had 100 yards in 3 games. He's got 2 touchdowns across his last 3 games. So Johnson's been trending up. Franklin's been trending down just a little bit, but yeah, I think that Franklin is still the one.
You don't underestimate the brotherly connection between Bo Nix and Tez Johnson. Just saying.
We got the roommate narrative. I think the brother narrative is even stronger. But I think both of these guys are good plays this week against that USC defense that we don't really know what to expect without Alex Grinch. This is the first time Lincoln Riley has not had Alex Grinch on the sidelines in a while.
Wow. Yeah.
Dating back to Oklahoma, where he had Mark Stoops. But Chris, what is standing out to you this week in these wide receiver rankings?
Yeah, it weights recent performance, and there's so much variance on a week-to-week basis that I understand. Like a guy like Sean Atkins at 12 is someone that I probably want to try to get into my lineup. They have a really good matchup against Temple. So like he's kind of emerged as a wide receiver one there for South Florida. So Atkins is a pretty interesting player. And some of these names are like, okay, wait, who's that? Why am I starting them? But I'm looking at them and I'm like, I love these matchups. I think these players are getting bigger pieces of the offense. Like I think Aaron Bedgood's a really interesting start. I think Salter could throw for like 5 touchdowns today against Old Dominion as well. So I think there's a lot of good wide receivers this week to play. I think the matchups this week are really, really solid.
And I gotta confess, like I had to look up Joey Hobart, but holy crap, he's been like double-digit catches 3 of the last 5 games or something. I mean, he's tearing it up for what is it, Texas State?
Yeah, he has been their lead wide receiver this year. We did have a question in the chat a little earlier related to another a Texas State wide receiver. We don't know if Nate McCullum is playing yet. Anybody have any news on that front? And if he does not, we got Isaiah Bond or Ashton Hawkins as a start sit.
I think I'll just play Bond.
Playing Bond this week, not Nate McCullum at all.
I don't know what's up with Nate McCullum, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's a tough matchup against Duke as well.
Haven't seen an update just yet. I don't know. I still kind of like Hawkins. His name has popped up, it seems like, every other show, and Hobart absolutely has been excellent, has been the go-to guy. But that Texas State offense has been productive enough that we've seen 2-3 guys per week put up some really strong numbers, and Hawkins is in that group, it seems to me, more often than not. So I would strongly consider Hawkins, but I understand Bond as well.
Texas State they're favored? Yeah, because I just played them last night. I expect that game to be kind of interesting for what it's worth against Coastal today. The over-under is 57. It's come down. It opened at 68. So, it's come down a lot. I still expect Texas State to score points, though. I think the under is coming because Coastal has their third-string quarterback in, and I'm not sure how many points they're going to get.
All right, and then we got one other question here. Lincoln Victor, the wide receiver for Washington State. Do we think he is playing today? He played last week, I think, right?
He did, a little banged up. The reports I've seen were somewhat vague, but didn't sound like he was expected to be out. So it would be a surprise if he doesn't play, to me. But we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that one for sure.
All right, and then we got 2 other start-sit questions here before we hop into the tight end rankings. Both of these quarterbacks related. 6-point passing TD in both of them. First one we have here, Joey Aguilar, the quarterback at App State, or Graham Mertz at Florida. We already know Chris's answer. Alfred, you willing to roll out with your boy Mertz?
I think Aguilar, I guess, I think an overall higher ceiling, not just even thinking about the passing TDs, but just overall some rushing contributions and generally more likely to probably put up more points. So I'd go Aguilar. Although Graham, that LSU Florida game, it could be, it would not shock me if there's 80 points. Both defenses are trash. Florida's functional against bad defenses. We saw them put up some points against South Carolina and stuff like that. So, Graham Mertz could have 3 touchdowns. That's not out of the range of possibilities at all, but I think I'd feel safer with Aguilar just because I feel like Florida at any point could just be like 12 points. Like you just don't know. You don't know if they're just going to be completely disastrous or if they're going to look functional.
I'm tempted to say Mertz. I mean, I was hesitant when you guys were saying that Pearsall is a good matchup this week, and then I know there's a lot of love for Eugene Wilson, and the LSU defense has been really, really bad so far this year. So I think they're both decent options, but I don't know. I might lean Mertz.
I don't think Mertz is a bad option, but I do lean Aguilar as well.
I think the Georgia State secondary that Aguilar is getting today is horrendous for what it's worth. Like real bad.
All right. And then last start sit question here before we hop into the tight ends. Another quarterback won 6-point passing touchdown. Carson Beck, quarterback at Georgia, going up against Ole Miss this week, or Jalen Milroe, quarterback at Alabama. Who do we like out of this crew?
This is a really good question.
I think Milroe.
I think these parts are very close.
Because I defer to the rushing. I mean, you're not like they say 6-point passing TDs. My brain immediately goes like, how many TDs? But if I think of globally, I'm going to lean towards the running QB almost always if it's even close. I mean, definitely break ties with that, if not more.
I think I'm going to go Beck. But this is really close. I think Beck is safer. Well, although Milroe has been playing great, so I don't even want to say safer. I took the Georgia team total over today, and I think Georgia's going to score a lot of points on this Ole Miss defense that I don't think is very good. So I think Beck's going to be a big part of that. And their running backs are always banged up, so who knows? If he gets Brock Bowers back today, which I think is a possibility, then even better. But I like Beck today.
I've got Milroe projected higher. I mean, they're both projected for more than 30 points and 6 points passing touchdowns, but Milroe currently 14th for the week, so would be 13th or 12th today, and Beck is 27th. So not a big gap, but give Milroe the edge, even though Kentucky can make things difficult sometimes.
All right, well, moving into the tight end rankings here this week. We got another name at the top who's been in the rankings the past couple of weeks, Mason Fairchild, the tight end at Kansas, playing Texas Tech this week. Another familiar face, Jack Veiling, tight end at Oregon State, playing Stanford. Bryson Nesbitt, that's Nick's guy over there. UNC playing Duke this week. Cade Stover, tight end at Ohio State versus Michigan State. David Martin Robinson, Chris's guy at Temple versus USF. Jake Brenningstool, tight end Clemson, playing Georgia Tech. Trey Watson, tight end Fresno State, playing San Jose State. River Helms, the tight end out of Western Kentucky, up against that New Mexico State defense. Zach Horton, tight end at James Madison, playing UConn. Colston Loveland, the quarterback or the tight end at Michigan, playing Penn State. Amon Green, tight end Georgia State, playing App State. Anthony Landfear, tight end at Memphis versus Charlotte. Tanner McLaughlin, tight end Arizona, playing Colorado. And rounding it out with Jaheim Bell, tight end of Florida State, playing Miami this week. Who stands out to you on this list, Nick, besides your guy, Bryson Nesbitt?
So my tight end projections in this list are pretty close this week. There's definitely a different order in some. Holker's not on this top 14, right? He's definitely one I would put in there. And then kind of alluding to some of the chatter, I might be willing to roll Brock Bowers out this week. It sounds like he is practicing, has practiced all week, trending in the right direction. This maybe is a silly bit of reasoning, but today is the final home game for Georgia. So would expect that this is Bowers' last opportunity to play between the hedges. So that makes me think maybe he'll be a little extra motivated to go. Big game against Ole Miss. I do think that there's a chance that we see a game from Ole Miss similar to what we saw against Alabama last week, where they were going for it on fourth down deep in their own territory, gave Alabama a bunch of short fields. I think that there's an opportunity for Georgia to be set up in a similar situation this week, and could definitely imagine Bowers has an opportunity to catch a touchdown pass or two today.
All right, Bowers, the former tight end stud, might be making his return this week. Chris, who stands out to you on this list?
This is just disgusting. The tight end position's so banged up this year. I mean, just gross.
And you of all people, that really affects you. That's a tough
it does.
Noted tight end guy.
Noted tight end.
Trey Knox is back for South Carolina this week. I think that you could probably start him. Josh Simon took his role last week as well. The tight end's a big piece of this offense. They get Vanderbilt today, so I think that he could do well. A name that's not on here, and he's owned in 5% of leagues. That if you need somebody and you could pick somebody up today, and you're like, man, I really feel bad about this position. I like Temple's tight end 2, Jordan Smith. We already have their tight end 1 on here, but like both those guys are so involved in the Temple offense that I don't mind like starting one of them, like the second one. So the TE2 for Temple is that
is a
desperation play.
That is so deep.
He was great last week, and whenever Warner plays, he's been solid. So amazing. If you really need somebody, that those are names that I'm targeting.
All right, Alfred, any names on this list that stand out to you? Anybody you're targeting?
I think there's a guy, and I'm not just being a homer. I just think this game could be a smorgasbord. Is Boardingham for Florida? I mean, you're looking at these guys in the double digits here. You're maybe hoping for 3 catches. I mean, Boardingham, I think you can pencil in for 4 to 5 catches in this game that I think is going to be pretty offensively dominated. So I think he's a guy that could slide in here in the double digit range. And feel pretty comfortable about it. So that was a guy that I thought was missing. He's been fairly consistent. He has one 7 for 99 and a touchdown game on his record this year too, which would put him probably top 5 or top 2 in a week. But otherwise, it looks pretty good. I mean, I think that like what Chris said, I mean, slim pickings. You're hoping for 4 or 5 catches for any of these guys.
Tight end is a tough position to figure out who you're going to start each week. We're going to head to break, but when we come back on the other side, we're going to give you some of our favorite starts and sits this week. So you still have time to drop your start sit questions in the chat. Throw a thumbs up on the video here. We're going to get into that right after the break.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. That is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, and they let him be the quarterback for a long time, too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there. Mm-hmm. And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. There's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl. And when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. I was, he played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing, too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. He was erratic. He wasn't terrible, though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
I would.
But Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game that they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, like, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky,
No way!
is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yards go.
Welcome back to the Tailgate, brought to you by Campus to Canton. Throw a like here on the video. Let us know in the chat where you're watching from. Head on over to our website at campus2canton.com for more informational starts, sits, all of your college football needs. Got it over there at the site. We're going to get into some start sit questions here, our favorite guys this week. But drop your start sit questions in the chat here as well. Nick, we'll come over here to you first. Who are some guys that you like this week?
Well, so I was struggling a little bit, quite honestly. So I was going to pose a start sit question, and maybe the 4 of us as a group will help us pick 2 starts and 2 sits at the quarterback position. For me this week, I've got to decide between 2 guys. I think I know where I'm leaning, but I've got 5 decent options to pick from, including Caleb Williams, Byron Brown, Rayner, TJ Finley, and John Rice Plumlee. So out of those 5, I think it's overthinking it to sit Caleb, right? I think Brown is the other one that I would lean towards starting, but I'm willing to ask for your advice and let me know if I'm wrong on those.
Chris, what are your thoughts here? You had some facial expressions there. You got some thoughts on this crew?
I think Nick is right. I think it's Brown and Caleb. I mean, I just don't. Something feels off to me about sitting Caleb Williams in the playoffs. Like, I don't know if I am. I have the mental fortitude to do that personally. I just
you
don't
never live with yourself if he has 40 points and you benched him. I mean,
no, I mean that's just galaxy braining. I think
right.
I just wouldn't feel good about sitting him, even if he doesn't do well. You're like, well, he's my number 1 quarterback player I drafted in the first round, and I wrote it out to, I think, the correct end. And I like
You're
Brown.
not going to get him in the championship either, Caleb Williams. So if you're going to play him in the playoffs, you only got 2 shots at it.
Oh, are they?
And I am not Caleb Williams is going to sit or needs to sit or anything like that. But man, I would be real sad if we get to kick off and it's like, oh yeah, by the way, Caleb Williams out tonight. So that's just like a 2% chance in my mind that something like that happens.
That's a late kickoff too, right?
Right.
It is.
10:30.
Yeah.
Yep. Very, very late kickoff. And that one gets some Pac-12 after dark action. Alfred, did you have a strong leaning out of that list? Byron Brown seems to be Chris's other favorite option out of that.
I think I agree. Yeah. I mean, just in the interest of time, we can move on. I agree with those choices.
All right. And Chris, we'll head on over to you here then for your start sits. Who do you like this week?
I really like South Carolina's matchup against Vanderbilt in general. I've talked a little bit about them on this show and why I would target some of their players. So I would just say that in general, but specifically Mario Anderson, the running back, he's emerged as the true like bell cow for this team, and he's catching passes as well. Vanderbilt's front seven's pretty poor. Their whole defense isn't very good this year. So I think that you can plug and play him for like 16 to 20 points and feel pretty good about it. And I mean, that's all you need if this is a guy that like is at the bottom of your roster. I don't know. I like him a lot. I think that you can certainly get some good production out of him today. And you want me to do a sit or no? Okay.
Yeah, fire away.
I don't like Colorado's offense this week. Arizona's been legit on defense. They've taken such a big step this year. I just don't feel comfortable. I think Shadur's a little banged up. I mean, I would be too if I took like 30 sacks a game. I don't think they're gonna be able to move the ball very well, to be honest. And this is a place to talk about it because I don't know if we'll talk about it again. This spread has come down. It was 10.5 this morning. It's now 9. That's kind of weird. And when I say weird, I mean I think the public is just betting a ton of money on Colorado. So, wink, wink for best bets later. I think we'll be fading Colorado today.
What would be the reason for that? Why would there be additional optimism for Colorado? Like just thinking it's a trap game for Arizona on the road, or
Colorado takes public money every Saturday. Like that's what it is, pretty much.
I mean, I can imagine people who maybe are not dialed in because of their recent history over the last 5 to 6 years, thinking that Arizona can't be for real. But like I think they are for real. I mean, I think they're a good team. And I think Colorado's not. I actually just took Arizona -10 before we got on the show this morning. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, I think it's just public money coming in, set back Colorado, not paying attention to how bad they've been for the last like 6 weeks.
All right.
All right, Alfred, heading on over to you here. Who do you like this week? You have a couple names written down on this list.
Yeah, and I try to pick guys that, I kind of go through my own rosters and pick guys that like I'm comfortable starting, that I feel like maybe people that are listening to our show, haven't thought about them, could be on waivers. Like a guy like Emmanuel Michel, I think is how you would say it, or Michel, Air Force running back. He's like the old who was the guy last couple of years? Same, I think must be the same role in the offense because he gets like
Brad Roberts.
So he's like the replacement for Brad Roberts. 20 to 22 carries, 80 to 100 yards. It's not going to be an explosion because it's pretty low, high volume, low efficiency. But a couple of touchdowns. They've got a premium matchup, isn't it? Hawaii. Just atrocious. They should destroy Hawaii, and they're going to be playing with a chip on their shoulder coming off that Army loss, right? That was their last game.
Yep.
And
yeah.
They embarrassed by Army. So anyway, I like a guy like that. Like throw him in your flex. Probably a better option than maybe who you have in your flex, who's playing a P5 game against a tough matchup. And then Caden Fagan. I think he's becoming a weekly starter now, folks. If you haven't been paying attention, I would pay attention to the injury situation as running backs may come back into the fold. Like last week, I think he was the only healthy scholarship running back. But I think he's shown enough. Like they're going to lean on him. I think you can expect 20 touches a game from Fagan. They've got a great matchup against Indiana this week. And then another one, I guess just I have a theme here this week. Florida, LSU. Plug in as many guys from that game as you can. And so I threw in Eugene Wilson. You're probably already considering starting him by now. He's been good lately, but
automatically start.
I think he's
Eugene Wilson.
He's the primary, weapon in that offense. It's been growing. They scheme him touches. He's going to get 10 touches. Well, 8 to 10 between his jet sweeps and receptions. So I like that.
All right. And we had a question in the chat pertaining to Emmanuel Michel here as well. One of your guys you said to start this week. Would you start Emmanuel Michel over Bisail Tutin, the running back for Virginia Tech, or Xavier Henderson, the wide receiver for Cincinnati, going up against Houston this week?
I've
Just
liked
like,
Tootin quite a bit this year. Actually, he's a fun player. What do you think, Chris?
I think you're just gonna get like 20 touches from Michelle against a pretty poor Hawaii.
You
front.
gotta like that. I mean, it could be one of those games where he has 3 touchdowns. Like Brad Roberts used to do that. 20 carries for 84 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, that's in play against Hawaii, I think.
He didn't get hurt last week, did he? Because he only had 8 carries, but I mean the game script was out of hand extremely quick.
I think that's more what it was. Unless, yeah, I may not be as up to date on injuries as some other people. So I guess make
We
sure
will have some injury updates later in the show, as well as the news keeps trickling in. Nick, any strong thoughts out of this crew? Who's somebody you'd start or sit?
So the thing that worries me just a little bit about Michelle is Air Force sometimes they can spread it to 12 different guys. Sometimes, they're one of those teams that leads the nation in yards per pass attempt just because they get huge plays, 70-yard touchdowns, and can sometimes just get a one score or a one play drive on a play like that just kind of limits Michelle's opportunities. And if we do think that this is a game that they're going to just go out and win big at Hawaii, maybe Michelle is out of the game in the fourth quarter as well. So I think there are a few different scenarios that make me worry that he will have another 8 carry game. Will that be 8 carries and 3 touchdowns, or will that be 8 carries for 32 yards and that's it? So it's a little bit risky, but I think the upside of that 3 touchdown game, I understand why is an attractive option. So this would be a tough decision for me. I might be tempted to go Tootin, but Michelle I think probably has that upside.
Are we saying then it's definitely not Xavier Henderson out of that group? Is that everyone feel good about saying?
I think he's the lowest ceiling of all of those, or not lowest ceiling. He is the lowest floor of all those players.
Yeah,
in my opinion. I mean, I think, although the scenario that Nick just described for Michelle is a real one, so I don't want to totally discount it. But
I think for the running backs too, kind of look at your matchup, and I do this every single time. Do I need 8 to 12 points just to slot in, just to maintain an edge on my opponent? Or am I facing the number 1 team in the league and I have to win to make the playoffs, or it is the playoffs and I have to win and I'm the 6th seed playing someone who's clearly better than my team? Maybe I go Michelle and hope for 3 touchdowns. So, kind of that risk reward. Do I need a boom? Do I need a boom week, or do I need just 12 points to keep that slot in my roster, helping the overall total of my team? So I think, look at your matchup there, Jim, and see if you feel like you need that crazy, I'm wishing on a star game from Michelle, or do you just want more consistent 12 points from Tootin? And, maybe he'll go off too, but that's how I look at it.
shout out to my boy Jim, who's given me the team that they're playing against and whether they're home or away. Because to be honest,
It's nice.
I go through a lot of football during the week. I don't always remember where certain teams are playing because I also look at the FCS stuff. And so my brain gets a little scrambled sometimes. So thank you, Jim. That's very helpful.
Making it easy on us.
Shout out Jim from Phoenix, Arizona. Said where he was
The Wisconsin
Phoenix.
icon. From Phoenix. Couldn't get more different than Phoenix and Wisconsin, I feel like.
All right, I have starting to sit this week that I like. Somebody that we talked about their tight end options earlier. It's EJ Warner, quarterback at Temple. They get USF this week, which is a very soft matchup. Their pass defense allows for 305.7 pass yards allowed per game, which is 132nd in the country. They're 6th worst in defensive pass EPA per play. And EJ Warner back healthy, threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in that first game back. The game before he got injured, 450 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's been cooking lately. So I like EJ Warner a lot this week. And then a sit for me is somebody who probably won you the week themselves last week by themselves. That's Dylan Johnson, running back from Washington. Huge game last week, but outside of that game last week, he only has one 100-yard game on the year and one game with multiple touchdowns. They get Utah this week. Like we talked about a little bit earlier in the rankings, Utah is maybe a little susceptible to the pass, but their rush defense is legit. They allow AD 1.2 rush yards per game, which is 6th in the country. They're 21st in defensive rush success rate. It's a tough matchup, and don't chase those points from last week. I am sitting Dylan Johnson. We have two other start-sit questions here. Then we'll hop into some prize picks plays for you, win you a little bit of money. 6-point passing touchdowns with a 5-point bonus for 300 yards or more. Who do we like? Garrett Green, the quarterback from West Virginia, or Cooper Legas, quarterback at Utah State?
Legas the guy, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty big bonus there for 300, and I think it's
Neither of them
worth-
are getting.
Hey, Legas, I thought the same thing, Chris, and I looked at recent games. He's had 2 300 games in the last 3 or 4. Probably
All right,
matchup
all right,
based,
fair
whatever.
enough.
But Green almost for sure ain't getting 300. I think he's got 1 in like all season or something. So I would say I'm with you though on Legas.
Hey, I would start Legas, assuming he. I mean, the other quarterback that was playing is hurt, or he got
Okay,
back.
he'll stay.
He's out. He's out.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think Legas, the receivers he's got to work with, I like a lot. Royals and Vaughn, more weapons and yeah, he's done it more consistently. Has a better chance if you're chasing that 300. I think Legas the guy.
Yeah, Garrett Green has been kind of inconsistent. I've had a hard time figuring out when to start and when to not. I mean, he has had some soft matchups and really hasn't exploited those as well as you would hope. He's also more the rushing threat. So I would agree with a 5-point bonus for 300 yards. I think I go with Cooper Legas as well. It looks like we got some agreement in the chat there as well. We got Jim with another tough one. He says it's his first round. He's really good at getting that 4 to 6 playoff spot. So he is in some matchups this week. Reggie Brown, the wide receiver for James Madison, at home against UConn. Roman Wilson, wide receiver, Michigan State, playing at Penn State in that game in this one. Or White, who's playing at Missouri today. I'm honestly not quite sure. Oh, Squirrel White playing at Missouri for Tennessee. Who do we like in this one?
I think I would go Reggie Brown. I know that he's kind of become the wide receiver 2 behind Elijah Surratt, but I still like this offense a lot. And I think he's the wide receiver 2 against UConn, they're favored by 27 points or something crazy like that. So yeah, I think I would go Reggie Brown. I always get confused what Squirrel White's role really is. And I don't trust Joe Milton to actually hit the deep shots. I mean, I know he has. I just think you're relying on that, and I'm not sure I want to do that. And I don't like the matchup for Roman Wilson today.
All right, Nick, you got any strong thoughts here?
It's a really good question. I don't have a great read on it, quite honestly. My instinct, but just because I can't help but love White and just I've already dug such a hole there that it's tempting. Yeah, I think I probably trust Mox on going with Brown, but White, I just can't quit him. So
you and me
he
both.
tempts me.
You and me both. I've been in on Squirrel White a lot this year too, but I think I would lean Brown as well. I think the volume that you're going to get, and that I think James Madison is going to beat UConn down pretty good. Alfred, you got a strong thought here?
I think I like Brown, but it is tough to bench Squirrel White, and then you get that notification like Joel Milton to Squirrel White for 78-yard touchdown. You're like, God. But that might be his only catch-all game. So, I think Reggie Brown, I always am going to lean towards volume. So,
all right, we'll hop into prize picks here. We'll win you guys a little bit of money today. Promo code C2C at prizepicks.com for a 100% deposit match. I'm a little biased, but I think we've been killing it this year on prize picks. I think we've been winning some people a lot of money on this one. But Nick, who do you have this week? Who are some of your favorite plays on Prize Picks?
So good news. Mox just dropped in the chat some injury news that impacted my prize pick. I was going to be on the Jermaine Burton over, but it sounds like he is out today.
Very unlikely to play.
Okay, so we're gonna cross that one off the list. The other two that saw a little bit of an edge in our projections, and most of the season we've leaned to overs because our projections have been on the low side. So I saw a good bit of daylight between our projection and Jalen Wright's over 69.5 rushing yards for Tennessee this week. But there was an under that I do think just sort of stuck out to me as one that I like. CJ Donaldson, West Virginia running back, under 78.5 rushing yards. Saw a pretty good projected edge there in our projected under. So with Burton out, we'll just stick with those two, but would, at least as far as our numbers go, those seem to be the ones to build around today.
All right, some nice plays there. Chris, who do you have this week? You got a couple of plays here.
Yeah, I like that Jalen Wright over too. I think it's gone up to 72, but I don't care. I'd still take it. I like the Baron Morton over 236.5 passing yards. He's healthy now, and when he's healthy, this offense clicks at a little bit different rate. I like the matchup today for Texas Tech. I think they could win this game against Kansas, and I'm not sure healthy Morton is being calculated into that line, and I think this number is a little bit low. Cam Scatabo under 52.5. Just Arizona State is down to like dudes who are like, I don't want to say they're walk-ons, but I think some of them are. Their offensive line is horrendous. It's just injury and it looked really bad. So I'm not sure that they're going to be able to get any push against a UCLA front that I think is really good. I think this whole offense is a problem today for what it's worth. I like Corey Dyches over 27.5 receiving yards. You know, I like this matchup for Maryland a little bit. I think there's a couple injuries on the Nebraska side that are interesting. But Dyches goes over this number more often than he doesn't. And I think this number should be like 35 rather than 27.5. And then, yeah, just give me those three, actually. No, you know what? Why not?
Do it. Give it to him.
No Fafita over 2.5 pass rush receiving. I think Fafita is going to have 3 touchdowns today. He's had 3 in every game but 1 since he's been starting. And I mean, I don't think highly of this Colorado defense. So
I'm glad I was going to make you give that one out because that's one that I was strongly considering as well. I like that Noah Fafita over 2.5 pass rush receiving touchdowns because you said he's hit that in every game except for 1 this year when he's been starting. So it sounds like we like the Arizona offense this week. Alfred, you have a play that I really liked here from that game as well.
Yeah. So I like Tet McMillan over 16.5 fantasy points. You know, my strategy in general, and I have to say that, you know, I probably didn't put the most research into these prize picks as some other folks, but I look at it and I'm like, look, he can get to 16.5 without a touchdown. That's what I
gets there every week.
That's what I want. I want 8 for 85 without a touchdown, and you're there. And then if you get a touchdown in the first quarter, you can already like cash it because he's absolutely going over. So
I love it.
Yeah, and
that was my favorite play of the week.
There we go. And then I'm a little more sheepish about this one, but I kind of like Jason Bean over 17.5. You know, if someone tells me that, hey, Texas Tech's defense has been nails that I'm not aware of, but, you know, I could rethink it. But, like, I think, again, I want to look at yards. How close can he get? You know, 250 passing yards, that's what, 10 points. And then 30 on the ground, that's 13. And then, you know, he just needs a touchdown one way or the other. A rushing touchdown gets you over. So I kind of liked that, you know, and he should have multiple touchdowns today, or could, maybe not should, but could in that game. Because Kansas defense is not very good. I mean, they're going to have to put up points. It's just a matter of if he's going to hand off or do it himself. And then finally, Carson Beck, under 280. I've been doing this. I'm sure Mox disagrees, but I think that I usually go when he's pushing 280 plus, I'll usually take the under, but that would probably be my least confident. I kind of think Ole Miss's defense is good. Chris seems to think they're frauds, which is fair.
All right. And the Tet McMillan plays is probably my favorite of the week. I put that on the show sheet and then I saw you had it. So I would hammer Tet McMillan over 16.5 fantasy points. We got some people in the chat too who are saying they like Jacob Cowling receiving yards. I think that Arizona offense could be a source of some good money today. I have two plays that I like. First one, very, very basic here, but it's I think this is an easy play on my end as well. It's Quinshon Judkins over a half of a touchdown. Like he has a touchdown in every single game this year except for Alabama. He's got back-to-back games with 2+ touchdowns. He's been cooking lately now that he's been back here from injury, and that Georgia run D is a little bit more susceptible than the pass defense. We've seen some teams be able to run on them. Auburn ran on them pretty well. I think that this is a smash play this week. And my second play is a little more out there. It's one of those combo plays. I kind of like going that route if I could find one. It's Jonathan Brooks and Trevor Etienne over 154.5 rush yards combined. Brooks has been over 100 yards in 5 games this year. And 2 other games he's at 98 and 99. So basically 100 yards or more in 7 games. Etienne had 80 yards last week, 42 and 49 in the 2 games before that. So you might need him to up his total a little bit, but that LSU defense is very susceptible to explosive rush plays. They are in the bottom 20 in the country and allowing explosive rush plays. I think we could see a big play and a big game out of Trevor Etienne to go along with Brooks's ho-hum just putting in another 100 yards here. So I really like Jonathan Brooks and Trevor Etienne over 154 rush yards combined. We got a couple other start-sit questions here in the chat. This one comes from Evan. We got start 2. Kevin Concepcion, wide receiver for NC State. Caden Fegan, the running back at Illinois, who was one of Alfred's favorite plays of the week. And Jaden Ott, the running back at Cal, playing Washington State this week, who just snuck in to the bottom of our running back rankings. Anybody got any strong leans in this one?
I think it's the 2 running backs. Is this start 1 or start 2? I didn't.
Start 2.
No,
Start
2
2.
running backs.
Yeah, with Brendan Armstrong, he offers a little bit on the ground and stuff, but I'm not sure I'm looking at him through the air to feed Concepcion. Good player, Concepcion, but I think the quarterback change hurts that.
And there's a QB change in Illinois too. Altmaier's out today. He's been running a little bit. Don't expect Paddock to run very much. Reggie Love is back for Illinois today, but I think that's what I've seen so far.
I thought he was done for the year.
No, McRae is done for the year, but Love is back today. So that could impact things a little bit for Fegan. Might tempt me to go with Concepcion. But I think Ott and Fegan are fairly safe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. It's not like they're getting back Bo Jackson. Reggie Love is a guy. It probably allows them to spell Fegan a little bit, but Fegan's
exactly
good. And he's the type of running back Belima wants to use, a 250-pound just monster. So, I think he still gets 20 touches. He catches a little bit too. So I think 20 touches for Fegan. And then, Love maybe chips in with 8 or 10 even, because they're not going to throw very much. By the way, is it Paddock, former Ball State Paddock?
Yeah.
Yep.
Good Lord. He's very bad.
Could see a lot of handoffs.
Paddock family, but as a quarterback, I don't think at Ball State he was not good.
I thought he played okay last week.
Hey, led him on a game-winning drive.
Yeah, he came in. He
was a level up.
Honestly, it wasn't that bad.
All right, and then the last start-sit question here before we hop into the Devy segment. So we got a video where we're just going to have one of our guys break down some of the players to watch for an NFL lens. But we got Feli Ashlock, wide receiver at Hawaii, or Trey Harris, wide receiver for Ole Miss. Who do we like out of these two?
Got to Gotta go
Trey
Ash
Harris, right?
against Georgia.
Or
I mean,
Ashlock against Air Force.
I like the Ole Miss offense versus Georgia more than I like the Hawaii offense versus Air Force, I think.
Yeah. Air Force is pretty nasty too. That's true, and they're gonna control the ball. So, all right.
Tell me
I
I'm wrong, Nick.
considered bringing up Ashlock as a sit this week.
Have you considered the waiver wire, sir?
Mr. Corey P.
Corey P. Look at the waivers, dude.
They both project for almost the exact same for me this week. So it's a real toss up. Ashlock comes out slightly ahead, and I think the volume potentially leads in Ashlock's favor. So they're basically the same, but I might lean Ashlock.
I'm sitting the entire Hawaii offense this week. I don't trust any of them in this matchup. So by default, I would go Trey Harris, but I don't feel good about that one, to be honest. All right. Well, we will hop into the Devy segment here. Then we'll head to break and we'll be back with some injuries and some bets and some best picks. Don't go anywhere.
What's going on, Campus to Canton family? Corey Prayer here from the Campus to Canton Devy team. It's week 11 and the season's really starting to die down, but we always got some Devy talent to look forward to. Let's go. Now, we're at the point of the year where we're really not going to see a lot of breakouts happen towards the back half of the season, but we are seeing a little bit of a breakout over at Illinois with freshman running back Caden Fegan. Now, this guy was a low-level recruit playing against low-level competition, so he wasn't on a lot of radars, but he had a really interesting athletic profile. I gave him comparisons to guys like Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin and Rashad Jennings, former New York Giants running back, so he was on some of the radars over from the guys at C2C. The situation was really a big factor here as well in the evaluation of Caden Fegan, because we've seen Illinois use a workhorse in the backfield like Chase Brown, who just previously went to the NFL, and they really didn't have a lot of strong options after he left. It took some injuries in front of him to finally get his chance, but I mean, he's looking good. 352 yards and 3 touchdowns over the last week, including 148 and 1 touchdown last week versus Minnesota. He's not doing anything amazing from like an advanced statistical standpoint, but he looks better than I would have ever expected given how raw I thought he would be entering college. Now, I want to talk about a quarterback that I really wasn't sure I'd be talking about anymore, especially in this draft cycle, and that's LSU quarterback Jane Daniels, who really showed no growth through the first 4 years of his collegiate career after that flashy freshman season he had at Arizona State. But 2 years in the LSU system has turned him from a safe, low average depth of target quarterback into one that's currently second in the Power 5 with 23 big-time throws. He's pushing the ball downfield more. He's avoiding sacks at the best rate of his career. He's thrown 10 more touchdowns at this point of the season than any of his 4 previous seasons. And after begging to see him add weight through his whole career, he's finally listed at 210 pounds. It's hard to kind of place him in this NFL draft, which is oversaturated with a bunch of quarterbacks. But he's really making a strong case to be selected as a day 2 pick and a nice project quarterback in the NFL. Sticking with quarterbacks here, we finally got to get an extensive look at the future of the Tennessee program with 5-star quarterback Nico Yamalieva, the number 1 ranked recruit by some of the outlets out there, getting to play about 2 or 3 series here in the blowout against UConn this past weekend. He went 5 for 9 for 92 yards, including a 25-yard run that really flashed some of that athleticism that we liked in his profile, but he really didn't look out of place in this offense. He wasn't the highest ranked quarterback for most of the analysts at C2C in this class and faced his fair share of criticism, but he had a really intriguing set of tools and fell into arguably the best situation for his skill set. He'll have a chance to be a high-end CFF asset from the jump and could still end up a very intriguing draft prospect, making him a name I expect to hear go fairly early in next year's startup drafts. It seems like every week USC is in this star-studded matchup that's going to potentially be a high-scoring affair, but we've talked about the Trojans so much over the last couple of weeks that I really don't feel like I ought to touch on them too much here. But I do want to look on the other side of this USC versus Oregon matchup this weekend with wide receiver Troy Franklin. Now, this is a guy who's a hot commodity amongst the C2C community, but I really feel like the NFL draft buzz hasn't caught up to that yet. Some analysts out there are concerned about his slight frame, but his size really isn't that far off from the 6'2", 180-pound frame that Cowboys wide receiver CeeDee Lamb entered the NFL with. He's taken major steps forward each year in versatility, usage, even things like yards per route run, missed tackles forced, and yards after the catch. He's becoming a much more dynamic and complete wide receiver as he goes on. I mean, if Oregon quarterback Bo Nix was a little bit earlier on a few deep shots. Franklin could be having a monster season as you see him constantly get behind the defense with the type of athleticism that you could see him running the low 4.4s or high 4.3s at the combine. He could honestly be that random sneaky name like Zay Flowers or John Dotson or Brandon Ayuk that we didn't necessarily expect to be a first-round pick, but finds himself as a day one selection in the 2024 NFL Draft. That's going to wrap it up for this week's Devy Sesh, guys. Make sure you guys are checking out the Back to Devy podcast every Wednesday morning, the #1 Devy podcast on the Campus to Canton Network. Don't let anybody else tell you different, and make sure you're keeping it locked with Campus to Canton all season long.
From the Hometown Hero series, Zach Parise.
That is a very nice card, and that's one I'll probably have to organize a little trade ski with you, because I would actually like that card.
I mean, you got downtown Newark in the background. I mean, Newark has never looked so good.
No, it is not.
We'll put that back up on the screen. I just want to have a penny sleeve ready, and yes, we can absolutely work out a little trade ski for that, because that belongs in a Devil fans collection right there.
I'll trade you the Braden Schneider rookie card for it.
Done.
There we go. The first card-for-card trade on Rip and Rip history. And it was that easy.
It was that easy. That's because, you know what? Because neither one of us are jerks. And it's the same thing when we try and do fantasy trades. Like, we don't try and screw each other. We have conversations. If there's a fit, there's a fit. If it's not, it's not. We don't try and, like, take the other one over the barrel. So there you go. In a penny sleeve. Hometown hero, Zach Parise. He was among the league's most productive goal scorers in 06-07 and followed up with a terrific regular season with an even more impressive postseason. And then they talk about what he did in the first round series against Tampa Bay that year. So that's off to the side for you.
That's true. And, if this is it for his career, he had a hell of a career.
He did.
Hopefully he comes back one more year with the Islanders, but if he doesn't, hell of a run.
Campus to Canton.
Welcome back to the Tailgate, brought to you by Campus to Canton. We got some bets for you here that we're going to drop. But before we get into that, we are getting into kickoff. It's getting closer to it. We're getting some injury news rolling in. Nick, Chris, what are you guys hearing out there as far as injuries? Who's in, who's out? What are we looking at?
So we've mentioned a couple of these. Jermaine Burton, as Mox dropped in the chat earlier, is not dressed right now. Didn't come out for warmups. Dealing with an illness, it sounds like. So hopefully nothing that is going to linger into next week. Clemson, Will Shipley is back and good to go, it sounds like. But linebacker Barrett Carter is out. So if you're looking for potentially any impact on betting that game, that's just something to keep in mind. Luke Altmaier, Illinois quarterback, is out. John Paddock is going to start. LSU running back Logan Diggs is out. Sounds like Chop Robinson, the elite pass rusher for Penn State, is good to go today. Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson for Florida State are both expected to play today. And one kind of odd note that caught my eye, not only it sounds like is Temple going to be without maybe multiple offensive linemen today. Apparently Temple cut its pregame warm-up short due to heat at USF. So I wonder if Temple's just not going to be acclimated today to the weather conditions. I don't know. I that was just something I saw and thought worth mentioning, but might want to look into it a little deeper to see what exactly that means.
Definitely an interesting note, especially for somebody who just said to start EJ Warner, the quarterback in that matchup. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. Chris, what are you seeing? What are you hearing as far as injury goes?
Yeah, Nick hit a lot of the big ones. Cade Klubnik still hurt. He was hurt last week. His ankle's pretty heavily wrapped. He said he's 100%. He's not 100%. Temple being down, multiple offensive linemen is big. Luther Burden's going to play today. He was banged up. He's banged up basically every week anyway. The Brady Cook is also going to play. He's a little banged up as well. There's a rumor out there, and I have not been able to get any confirmation on it. But Tyler Van Dyke might get sat today for Emory Williams. I've seen that from a few people, but nobody official. So I would just, if you are starting Tyler Van Dyke, I would pay as close attention as possible to that news because
maybe look somewhere else.
yeah. And then I mean those are really the big ones. I think we hit them. JT Daniels. I don't remember if Nick mentioned him or not. I was half listening, half watching the board. I think JT Daniels is going to be out. I'm fairly confident he's in concussion protocol, and I don't think he was cleared. I heard he was going to be out earlier in the week, and I heard the same thing from Preston Stone, and then Preston Stone played last night. So, like, I expect JT Daniels to be out. And I think the line and the number is expected to be out, him to be out too.
Just something to keep an eye on. But all right, we will get into best picks here. Nick, coming over to you first. What are some of the bets and the best games that you like this week?
So every week for the last 6 or 7 weeks, I've been circling games that are favorites expected to cover, projected to cover in all three of our different projection numbers. Liberty, I feel pretty good about this week. Last I saw that was minus 13.5 against Old Dominion. Our projections are in the 15s, basically across the board or higher. Iowa, and this one has bounced around quite a bit. I saw anywhere between Iowa minus 1.5 to at least at some point earlier in the week, saw Rutgers as about a 1-point favorite. But we've got Iowa by 2 or more, so pretty much anything in that range. And we released it earlier in the week at 1.5 officially. Oklahoma minus 12.5 today against West Virginia. Alfred brought that game up early. Thought it was a good spot for Dylan Gabriel. I agree. Our numbers agree on that one. Kind of a weird one, but we were on NC State minus 2.5 at Wake Forest even before the MJ Morris news came on. And this probably sounds weird, but Armstrong being back as the starter actually improved our projection in that game. So feel okay about that one. And then for the Ivy League this week, we've had a decent run so far this year. I actually don't like any of them that are on the board right now. I've got some projections that give me different different info. So we're gonna shelve that this week. But one did catch my eye. Alabama A&M minus 2.5 at Bethune-Cookman. Both of our FCS projection models had that closer to a touchdown. So kind of like that. And I don't know if this is allowed. You guys shoot it down.
Everything's allowed.
I'm looking at Ohio State over 11.5 wins at plus 200 for season win total. I've got Ohio State as a 26 or more point favorite in each of the next 2 weeks, and then about a 3-point underdog against Michigan. So I'm basically counting Ohio State as winning the next 2 games, and that plus 200 roughly is what Ohio State is a 6.5 point underdog if we were just to look at that game in particular. So see a little value on that as well. So we'll throw that into the mix.
It's at the Big House this year, right?
It is. But I don't know if you guys have heard, there are some non-football things that are floating around Michigan, can potentially be a little bit of a distraction. And Ohio State was our preseason number 1 team. They're number 2 right now to Michigan in our power rankings. So do have Ohio State as an underdog in that game, but I think that's decent value at plus 200.
I like that. I haven't heard too much about what's going on in Ann Arbor. You know, there's not a lot of places talking about it right now. It's pretty under the radar, but I guess some whispers that Jim Harbaugh might not be on the sidelines for the next couple of weeks. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out because they apparently filed a temporary restraining order on that one. So we'll see. But Chris, what do you got this week? What are your favorite plays?
I want to ask y'all if I want to crowdsource this one real quick. Is Georgia team total 34.5 still out there? Or is that long gone? Because I haven't seen it this morning. Oh yes, it is. Ha! Georgia team total over 34.5. It's on FanDuel and it's on DraftKings.
Both places.
Yeah, minus 120 on FanDuel if you want the best number. I think Georgia's going to score a lot on this Ole Miss defense. I really don't think they're very good, and I think the Georgia offense is actually kind of feisty. I also like Arizona minus 9. There's an 8.5 out there if you are in tune with the offshore markets. So it's not, trust me, it's not hard to find if you want that number. I believe 9 is available at Profit Exchange.
Profit Exchange.
Yeah, there's if you have ProLine Plus, there's an 8.5 out there, which would be by far the best number. So yeah, I like that Arizona number, especially at 9, because I think the public is just steaming it up right now.
It's 9.5 on DraftKings, but it came down from 10 an hour ago.
Yeah.
You mentioned some late money coming in on Colorado. Probably
they've been backdooring a couple situations, but I think Arizona's just like 2 touchdowns.
I really do think it's people being like, "Oh, Arizona's terrible," because they've been terrible for 5 years, but they're good.
Yeah.
They're actually.
I don't think it's sharp money. And then UTSA 13.5 versus Rice. Like I said, JT Daniels isn't playing. Without JT Daniels, I think it's a pretty hobbled Rice team. I don't think they can move the ball nearly enough. And I don't like this UTSA defense. I mean, they allow a lot of people to score and keep up with them. But I don't know that we're going to get that out of Rice today. So give me that as long as it's under 2 touchdowns. And it is available pretty much everywhere under 2 touchdowns.
What about we talked? Well, I was looking at these. We talked about this game earlier. New Mexico State, solid defense. They kind of muck it up. Western Kentucky has not been that good this year. I know it's at the Hill, and we love Western Kentucky as a site. C2C loves Western Kentucky, but New Mexico State money line plus 170 or plus 4.5. I don't know. Strikes me as kind of a value because we talked about that game earlier, and I just think that might be a decent. But we haven't talked about the spread really. But.
I think that's the right side. I wish I had a little bit more value on it. I mean, kind of dead zone at 4.5.
Okay, fair enough. Well, money line though, you just got to win the game. I mean, can they win at Western Kentucky? Okay, all right. To interrupt.
I do have one more that I did not have in the sheet that I gave out last night to Campus Canton NIL channel. Texas State minus 1.5. It's out there at a couple spots still.
Alfred thumbs up agreeing on that
I
one.
did that earlier today. I like it. I like it as well. It's 2.5 on DraftKings, but that's still fine.
Yeah, I mean, you can. Where is it? 1.5. I just saw it not that long ago. Maybe that 1.5 is gone.
You got to get on those quick when we drop them in the Discord. For anybody who's a member at the site, head on over to our Discord. You're losing money not being in there. Chris is dropping plays very early in the week too, before the line movement.
Yeah,
but I was gonna plug that as well. I mean, I pointed out 3 player projections in the Louisville and Southern Miss games earlier this week that went 3-0. Chris, I know, had a couple of player props hit as well. You were 3-0 one night this week, so yeah, the Discord is a nice place to be.
Yeah,
you're losing money not being in there.
I cannot get a widely traded 1.5 for Texas State, but I can get 2.5, and I like it under 3. I really do.
Okay. We like it under 3. We'll move into the game picks here. We have some big games this week. We'll start off with the first one, probably the biggest game of the week. Number 3, Michigan, a 4-point favorite at Penn State in Happy Valley. Probably the best game in the new window here. We'll go along with some picks. Alfred, who are you taking in this matchup?
I want to change it because I talked to Austin.
Put me on an island. That's fine.
I was in Pittsburgh this week. I was talking to Austin. We were just having some beers, chatting it up. And, we liked Penn State, and that's what I put on the sheet. But, now, isn't Harbaugh officially suspended as of yesterday? So he's suspended, right? So, I almost think that might be a plus instead of being in the storm of what's going to happen. Now they kind of know what's going to happen. And I think Michigan could just come out and be like, F this, we're still Michigan and we're marching towards the playoff instead of feeling weird about it. Now that there's a little clarity, maybe that's way over narrative street. But I feel, honestly, with that news, I feel less comfortable betting Penn State. I thought when it was all still smoky, no one knew what was going to happen, maybe Michigan walks in with the bad mindset. I think 4 is probably the right number. I think it's going to be a tight game, and so it's hard to pick. But I will be in solidarity with you, Colin. I'll stick with Penn State, but it's
all
a
right.
very weak endorsement.
If you're not a believer, it's okay.
Yeah.
I forgive you. And then we'll head on over here to Chris. Chris, who do you have in this one?
I did not give it as one of my best bets today, even though I believe it is a best bet.
Hater.
I like Michigan. I really do. I like Michigan. I think that they are a much better team than Penn State all around. I just do. I mean, it's at Happy Valley, and Michigan's still favored by 4. And without Jim Harbaugh,
should be a night game. Should be the whiteout.
Well, Penn State has control over it. I don't know why they didn't. They whited out who? Michigan State?
No,
or Iowa? Wow. Congratulations. You played the whiteout against the worst offensive team that you're going to play this year.
In history.
There's some 4s out there that I would actually legitimately play. So yeah, I like Michigan here. I just think it's a good matchup for them and a bad matchup for Penn State.
Nick, who do you got in this one? What are your numbers saying?
Well, so I was looking at some of the different what lines are posted, and I'm seeing 4.5s and 5s. Seems like this is really moving towards Michigan a little bit more. My projections have been on Michigan. Most updated team strength projection has Michigan favored by almost 6. I just think Michigan's the better all around team. What I've seen on the field so far this year, they've been dominant. Post game win expectancy numbers. They had their first non 100% last week against Purdue, and it was 99%. So that's about as dominant as it gets. I know that Penn State is definitely the best and most talented team that they will have played so far this year, and also it's a very, very tough place to play. But I just think this game looks like one Michigan should win by a touchdown.
And I am, of course, contractually obligated to say that Penn State is going to win this one. But with the way that the line has been moving, if you can, get that before kickoff and it's a little closer to a touchdown, I like that even more for Penn State.
You ain't get a touchdown.
Getting towards. But
no, I know. You're going to get a 5 at best, I think. Would you back Penn State at 5?
No, I don't bet on Penn State games.
Okay, I don't bet on South Carolina games either.
All right, and then we have brought on our draft expert over at Campus to Canton, Barnabas, to break down some of the matchups to keep an eye on in each of these games from an NFL draft perspective. Barnabas, what are some matchups you're watching in this Penn State-Michigan game?
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying I don't usually make game picks, but I will say for a coach that doesn't call plays on either side of the ball, most of their coaching is done by Friday night anyway, so this game shouldn't really be that much affected by Harbaugh not being there. But the matchup I'm watching this week is Michigan's edges versus the bookends for Penn State. So we've all heard about Olu Fashanu. He's supposed to be a top-tier offensive tackle coming out in this draft. But the guy on the other side actually has been fairly impressive this year. I turned on the Penn State-Ohio State tape from this year just to see what Caden Wallace was all about. He's not as nimble as Olu, but he had JT Tuimoloau for most of that game. And JT only had one good play, which was a sack, and that happened on Olu Fashanu's side. And so, he's been fairly impressive this year. And they're going against, Michigan has this 4-man edge rotation, but the 2 guys coming out this year are Jalen Harrell and Josiah Stewart. And they're good, but the problem is I listed their combined weights on here. And I think it's notable, right? So the Michigan duo, they're Michigan has athletic defensive linemen. They love their penetrating edges. 480 pounds between the two edges here, while Olu Fashanu and Caden Wallace combined for about 660. That's a 180-pound difference between the two of them. So, if I'm calling plays, I get where James Franklin comes from. We were talking about Penn State's offensive play calling before the show. Yeah, when you have that kind of advantage, yeah, you try to run them over, but, I think that Olufashanu and Keaton Wallace are both high end draft picks, and maybe Michigan's defensive line is not quite as impressive as it has been in past years, maybe. But that's the matchup I'm watching in this game.
All right, we'll move to the West Coast now, and we got Utah, number 18, at number 5, Washington. This is an 8-point spread on DraftKings. Alfred, coming over to you first here. Who are you taking in this one?
Looks like I'm the odd man out here, but I think what Utah covers. I mean, a touchdown. I don't know. I think Utah covers. They're just a good, well-coached team. They come prepared every single week. They don't make a ton of mistakes, in my perception. I don't have the penalties in front of me, but they just seem to be very well coached, very well prepared, and they're just a tough out. I don't see Washington running away. I mean, sure, I guess they could win by 10, but I would bet on a one-score game and a tough matchup.
All right, Chris, what do you got in this one?
I like Washington. It's on the road for Utah, and it's really tough to play at Washington. The way the stadium's built, it gets loud, and I'm not sure Utah's going to be able to keep up. To be totally honest, and the Utah defense is good. It's solid, but the front seven is really where they make their money, not really the secondary. And I think that Washington can exploit that for sure. So I like the Huskies to cover this number.
Okay, Nick, what are your numbers saying?
Yeah, I agree. I have a lot of respect for Utah, the way that they are able to show up and just overcome a talent disadvantage as often as they are. But man, this game just doesn't really seem to be set up, I think, for Utah to be able to keep it this close. I think for that to happen, they're going to need a score on special teams or you pick six, something like that. And they're certainly absolutely capable of doing it. But Washington, I think, especially if they get off to a strong start, Utah just doesn't quite have the manpower to go score for score with Washington. And Utah's so far below 100% health-wise on both sides of the ball. It really looked like it showed up 2 weeks ago. And I know they, certainly look like they corrected some things being, getting a 55-3 win last week. But I think we're more likely to see the style of game that Utah played against Oregon, not against Arizona State. So I think Washington's going to be able to win this one by double digits.
All right. I am also on the Washington train in this one. We talked about the offense of Washington and a little bit about the secondary for Utah. Barnabas, it seems like that's where you have your eye as well.
Muted.
Mute.
Yeah, Washington's wide receivers got a little bit of a break last week. Dylan Johnson just kind of was the entire offense. And we've talked enough about Washington's wide receivers. They're all great. Dane Brugler recently came out with a new top 50, and he had Jalen Polk as a top 50 guy. So that's interesting. And, Utah is always producing at least one draftable corner that's like hard-nosed, bigger, like physical type guy, like a la, Chicago Bears, Jaylon Johnson. And so that's this year's iteration is Amaya Vaughn. He's probably coming out this year, and he's going to get drafted, probably early day 3 guy in my opinion, but right now, but we'll see as the process goes on. I just wanted to highlight some of the young guys. They have a very young secondary behind their starters. They got starting at strong safety is Sione Vaki. He's only a sophomore, and you have 5 freshmen, redshirt and non, in that secondary that are all contributors right now, including for the 3 corners. They have more than 33 games played total in their careers. So these are experienced freshmen. And so I'm looking forward to watching these guys, develop in that system, especially when they move to the Big 12, right? And so Davis, Johnson, Snowden at corner, and Richie and Hall are all freshmen, and they're all contributing already. So I want to see how they develop over time.
All right. And then the next big matchup of the day, probably the second biggest game here. We got number 9, Ole Miss, at number 2, Georgia. Georgia, a 10-point favorite. over there on DraftKings. This is the later game at 7 p.m. Alfred, we'll move through this one a little bit more quickly. Who you got in this one?
Yeah, I've lost a lot of money on Georgia fading them this year, but I'm going to keep doing it because eventually they're just going to have an off week, right? So I'll take Ole Miss in points.
All right, Chris, who you got here in Ole Miss, Georgia?
Ole Miss, man, they are so stinking fraudulent. I'm telling you, if you go back and watch Ole Miss football, they're lucky to be where they are right now. They really, really are. Their defense is not nearly as good as I think people think it is, and the offense is good. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not sure they're going to have the firepower to beat Georgia today. I like Georgia here a lot. I just really, this is me fading Ole Miss because I think that they're going to, I think time for them to get caught, to be totally honest. I think we're going to see potential beatdown today.
Ole Miss fraud and rebels. Nick, who do you got on this one?
I don't have a great read. I could see Georgia winning in a blowout. I could see Ole Miss finding a way to knock off Georgia. I think they've looked beatable at times this year, but settling on Georgia to win, but close by about a touchdown.
All right, I'm on the Georgia train here in this one. I think Ole Miss is a little fraudulent as well.
Yeah, fraud watch. Let's go.
Barnabas, who are you keeping an eye on in this one? What matchup do you got?
Yeah, so Ole Miss's defense is really funny because they're kind of weak up the middle, but their edges and their corners are pretty decent. So I'm looking at DeAndre Prince versus a wide receiver that a certain Campus to Canton founder has been, kind of pumping up recently, and Lad McConkey. Prince is a little bit bigger and more physical, so we'll see how a smaller guy like McConkey fares against him.
All right, and then the last one we have here, USC going up against Oregon, number 6. That's a 16-point spread. We'll run through this one quickly. Alfred, who you got?
USC covers or gives up and loses the rest of their games. As of right now, I'll say USC figures it out and covers this spread of 16.
All right, Chris, what are you looking at?
Oregon, I think USC's toast.
Nick, what are your numbers saying?
USC, but I don't feel great about it.
I'm also on Oregon. I think USC is toast as well. Barnabas, what's a quick matchup you got here in this one?
Yeah, I wanted to say Caleb Williams versus Emotions, but on a more serious note, Bucky Irving against that defense. Dylan Johnson ran over them, but Bucky Irving's going to try to run around them, so we'll see if that makes a difference.
All right. Well, I think that is going to do it for us here in this one. Got some nice games on deck. Good luck to everybody in their fantasy playoffs matchup here. This has been the Tailgate, brought to you by Campus to Canton.